Bienvenidos, everyone. Welcome. We are at this session right here, so now is the time to exit if this is not the session you wanted to come to. From La Perrera to an amigo, from the dog catcher to a friend, engaging with your Spanish-speaking community. So my name is Jackie Hernandez. I'm the VP of Shelter Operations and Strategy at the Nebraska Humane Society. Obviously, I'm not originally from Nebraska, so I kind of go everywhere, but that is what I currently call home and love. And this is my amiga, Finn. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hola. My name is Finnegan Dowling. I've been working in animal shelters for 30 years. I've worked in shelters all around the United States and in Nicaragua, and yeah.
So, ¿qué onda, Finn? What are we going to talk about today?
We are going to foster trust and positive relations within the Latine community, Jackie.
No way. So we're also going to be improving accessibility to services in the Spanish-speaking communities that you're visiting, or maybe in your own community that you serve.
But wait, stop, because we're going to understand and respect cultural nuances to enhance outreach efforts.
And spoiler alert, we're going to transition from La Perrera to a friend, un amigo.
And one of the most important things is we are going to ensure equity in community care for every client that comes into our doors.
Louder for the people in the back.
We are going...
Just kidding. So, why does this topic matter so much? Why are we so passionate about this? As you can imagine, in the United States, 13.4% of people speak Spanish. That's 1 in 10 people. Now, that number might not seem like a lot, but there's quite a few of us in the room, so raise your hand if you know some Spanish. Mic drop. I'm done. And so these numbers are probably lower just because of the ways that we collect this data, right? So census, surveys, door knocking, especially in the moments that we're in now, door knocking isn't really a thing that's going to be happening for surveying. So these numbers are just a glimpse of what is actually happening or in the communities that you're serving. In California, there's approximately 28.18. So like, again, that's a huge amount of people. An untapped water is what I like to call it. And so the why is those numbers represent humans that love their animals, and that is the why.
And if you think about it, like we're all in sort of a crisis state right now, depending on where you are in the United States. We're seeing, a lot of us have been seeing unprecedented intakes, unprecedented different things, different bad things. And imagine what we could do if we had 10% more of our community engaged and participating with us. I work with shelters on a variety of topics, and one of the big things I always hear is our community is not responding to our foster pleas, they're not responding to our adoption pleas. And my question is, particularly depending on where you are you sure about that? Have you really asked the entire community? Because in a lot of cases, the answer is going to be no.
This is my favorite, what's the word?
Slide?
Well, yeah, it is my favorite. One of my favorite slides, actually. But one of the things I always like to start with, and I will repeat over and over again, is that Latine is an umbrella term. So often I hear, oh, do you speak Mexican? Are you Hispanic? Let's talk about that. So when you're referring to the individuals of your community, know that Latine is an umbrella term. You could be El Salvadorian, Colombian, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Mexican. I happen to say, yes, I am Hispanic because I know that I have Hispanic heritage from Spain. I have descendants from Spain, but I also was born and raised in Mexico. So I could go either way, me personally. But I have other friends who, if I called them Hispanic, they would throw a chancla at me. So that being said, it's a diverse community. We're not just Mexicans, we're not just Colombians. There's a little bit of everything, and that's We have a little bit of sazon, and that's what makes us so great. And that's why I invite you to ask those questions. It's okay to ask, just be careful how you ask it, and don't assume. Hispanic, while that is traditionally what we've been referred to as, some people do not identify as Hispanic. So keep that in mind. If anything, remember that, please. So, breaking down barriers. How are we going to do that? Traditionally speaking, when we engage with the communities, we're known as the dog catchers, right? Earlier today, someone said that in Disney, they always portray us as the villains. And it's so true. Unfortunately, especially in the state that we're currently in, when some citizens see individuals of authority in uniforms, that's not an engaging person that I want to speak with. So breaking down barriers starts with asking yourself, how can I remove these? What makes me look like an authority figure versus what makes me look like a friend, someone I want to be approached by? So think about things like that. Obviously, when it comes to enforcement, historically speaking, we're getting in trouble, right? So taking that enforcement and twisting it to education. How can I help you understand what's happening? How can I provide a resource to you that maybe you need? So barriers start from day one, from the conversations and how we approach people, and what we're wearing when we approach said people.
And I mean, how many of you have seen sort of a shift in your own organizations where you're moving your animal control people away from enforcement and into resource providing? And okay, that is a relatively new shift in animal welfare, and it's been pretty widespread, but it's still very new. It's something that we're working on in all of our communities. We're seeing a lot more job titles that say things like humane officer as opposed to animal control officer. So think of how new that shift is just with like the communities that we're used to working with. And now think of how we have to make that shift with these communities. And yes, it might mean that we have to take a couple of extra steps, but that's fine. That's completely fine. It's a sea change shift across all of animal welfare, and this is part of it.
Yeah. When we surveyed before we did this talk, one of the things that we knew we were going to see was that there was limited knowledge of available services to communities, and then on the other side, the animal control side, how do you communicate those things? So one of the things that Finn and I did was we came up with a workbook for you guys to take home. There's going to be QR codes, and I have physical copies as well. But that, again, the book is not going to teach, it's not a miracle book, so it's not going to teach you Spanish necessarily, but it will help guide you in the field. And so we'll talk about it a little bit in depth, both in the presentation and then after the session when we have time. But we knew that with the limited resources out there, that is a barrier for individual agencies. So we want to help you. Mutual Rescue also is doing amazing things in the background. And so we want to make sure that you have those resources available to you. Maybe 3-4 years ago, those resources weren't, but now we know that that is an issue, and people are making change because of that. So a quick Google search, and I bet you could find it. So, building trust. How does that happen, right? So, step one, I always tell people, is be an active listener. Even when someone is speaking a different language, I can guarantee you that there is a way that you guys can communicate. Whether it's hand gestures, drawings, not my favorite, but even like using an app that translates for you. Where there's a will, there's a way. Especially when an individual comes to your shelter, they've made twice the amount of efforts that any English-speaking individual would. So make the efforts that they have put into coming into your shelter. We have simple Q&As. Why are you here? How can I help you? And then it's a pointing game. There's different ways. Small steps can go a long way. But be an active listener and make sure that you understand what your community's concerns are. So we always like to collect data because it gives us so much information. So that one individual can tell you about their neighbor or their primo or their mom and what's going on in their house as well. So that helps you collect that data that you might need for the future. Transparency. Be honest, share your goals and processes openly. So as an agency, as a leader, I employed you to go back and say, we want 2% of our staff to know Spanish, and true individuals from the community. I'm not saying like, hey, I took Spanish in high school. I'm saying someone who lives, breathes, knows the barrio, right? Someone who will know and be trusted in your community, and pay them their worth. I want you to make sure that when you hire an individual who speaks Spanish, that you are paying, they know that that is their job description, and that you're paying them for that skill set, because that's exactly what it is. You need them more than they need you.
And it shouldn't just be an incentive. I challenge all of you to write your job descriptions to reflect the communities that you are serving. And what that might look like is you are not writing a job description for an adoption counselor. You are writing a job description for a bilingual adoption counselor. You are looking outside of the places that you would normally look to hire. Maybe you're looking at community colleges. Maybe you're looking at other places. Maybe you're looking at community centers and putting up flyers. But your job descriptions need to reflect the community that you are serving. And that will include, in a lot of cases, the word bilingual, depending on where you live.
Be empathetic. Oftentimes we're judgmental, right? It's something that has come to us. It was us in the past, and now we're trying to be better. But that includes those conversations that we're having with people. So when someone walks in the door and maybe their Chihuahua has long nails, hey, can I help you with that while you're here? Versus like, ugh, did you see those nails? So be empathetic, whether that's at your shelter or in your community. And I also encourage you to include learning Spanish as part of your CE for your staff. That's a fun, innovative way. Do it together as a group. Make it a challenge. There's so many resources that we're going to provide to you, some free, some at cost. But that is something that it's what the world we live in now. So I encourage you and your staff, go to your manager, say, hey, can I do this as a CE course? Because I can guarantee you the investment is going to be a ripple effect of awesome. I just made that up.
Oh, context. How many of you have seen or heard a story about motor oil dogs? About, oh yes, the dog found coated in motor oil, and how abusive that is. I'm going to start with a personal story about this. This photo is actually from Ukraine, but if you Google motor oil dogs, you'll see these like stories, horror news stories all over the place. When I was just a wee pup, I started working at an animal shelter in Nicaragua, and I was new to the community. I was new to everything. I didn't know anything, and we were getting a ton of motor oil dogs. And so, like a lot of gringos that had possibly been to Cancun on vacation in the past, my first thought was how horrible these people are abusing their dogs. They're coating them in motor oil. And I got checked really quick on that, and I'm very glad I did, because it turns out that motor oil, which is actually quite pricey to purchase, is a folk belief that it will cure mange, it will deal with fleas, it will do all of those things. And so for people that did not have access to a vet, but that loved their pet, that was what they were doing. They were using the resources that they had to do the absolute best they could for their pet. And if San Antonio was in the room, I wanted to give them a shout out, because I saw a news story from San Antonio about a motor oil dog, and they got it so right. And it was one of the only ones that I saw where they got it right, where they talked about a dog that had been left outside the shelter covered in motor oil. And they said, it appears the people tried to treat the dog with motor oil, which is a common folk belief. And then when it didn't work, they left the dog somewhere where they knew it would get help. They went in with the idea that the person had good intentions, and they were right. Community dogs, you see them all over Mexico. Jackie can tell you more about that. But basically what I've learned from spending a lot of time in Latin America is that community dogs are like latchkey kids from Gen X. Do all of you, like, we were just let loose to run through the neighborhoods, and everybody in that community was looking out for us. And in a lot of Latin America, you will see that. You will see these well-fed dogs, and you will see them hanging out in front of stores, and you see people and tourists come by and be like, oh my God, it's a stray dog. And meanwhile, the dog's got 8 people feeding it. It goes home every night to sleep, and plus it's like cadging snacks off all the tourists, and everybody in the town is looking out for it to make sure that it's okay. Also, if there's a huge sort of understanding that there is not a culture of animal welfare in Latin America, and that could not be more untrue. If you ever want to go to one of the most dog-friendly cities in the world, go to Mexico City. There is a dog park pretty much every 2 blocks. There's numerous dog parades. There's festivals every month in different plazas with free spay and neuter. And outside of, the malls are dog friendly, as long as your dog is not on a flexi lead, which is not a thing there, which I think is awesome. But if almost all of the 7-Elevens and Oxxos in the walking areas have those, and if you read it, it says, I'll wait for you here. And it's got a water bowl and a leash hook, so that if you're out walking your dog, it's so expected that people are out with their dogs that they can just go in and get a soda and the dog will be perfectly safe there. So there is a very vital and alive culture of animal welfare and culture of amazing pet care in Latin America that for some reason gets overlooked a lot.
And all I'll add to that from what Finn said is sometimes when I go visit family in Mexico, I feel like we're behind the times here. The community is taking care of the animals, just like Finn said. So yeah, I mean, they're literally, like, the breed is Mexican street dog. So, because it doesn't matter, that's Paco or that's Pancho or I don't know, that one just showed up. But they're all taking care of
Solo
each dog. Yeah. And they're being fed by the community. They're being watched for by the community. They know them by names. They know when they show up and when they don't show up. So let's take that and use that for our own community. The concept is community cats, right? Same thing kind of happens here. People are altering these animals and putting them back on the street because people love them. And now, what I'm not saying is start a TNR program for dogs here. You do you, boo. But I don't know that we're there yet. But what I am saying is, take that judgment away again and remember that in other countries, this is what's happening, is the community is taking care of their pets together.
And one more thing, if I can add, is about euthanasia.
Yeah.
Is that when I was working in Nicaragua, we would see a lot of really sick dogs. And again, like my gringo mind was like, oh my God, like they don't care about their animals. Like, why aren't they bringing them in for euthanasia? And it turned out, I talked to a couple of people about this where we were trying to get them to euthanize dogs that had cancer or were very elderly. And this was largely in the poor areas. And every time I got the same response, I grew up Finnegan Dowling, like Boston Irish Catholic, right? So I grew up in a really Catholic family. And well, not me personally, obviously, but that religion does not believe in euthanasia because you won't go to heaven. And what we were seeing was pet owners that loved their animals so much that they did not want to euthanize them because they honestly believed that their dog would not go to heaven and they would not see them again if they did that. It was not an act of neglect, it was an act of extreme love.
My favorite way to improve accessibility is the World Wide Web. Is your website in Spanish? Do you have a way to translate it? Are your resources already in Spanish? Are your animal control officers engaging with people and having the ability to give the information in both English and Spanish? When we first started the community cat program in Omaha, Nebraska, we knew of 2 zip codes that had the highest, they were hot zones, right? They were like bright reds. And when I was talking to some of the staff, they were like, well, yeah, that's the north side and that's the south side. Like, they don't care. And what we came to find out is that, especially for the south side, when I went and engaged with them and did grassroots efforts, they said, oh, you took my cat. Where is my cat? I haven't seen my cat in 3 days. I asked my neighbor. They're taking account for every single individual outdoor cat. And they cared so much. Some of them even came to the shelter, said, I saw a guy, he had a trap, what's happening? And so we quickly learned that they cared, and they cared so much. They were passionate about these cats. And so, but they didn't have the information, so they didn't understand what was happening. They thought we were taking the cats, and then they would maybe see them another day. And we had one individual come in and say, my cat's injured, his ear, like it's bleeding, you know, and it was an ear tip, so we had to explain that as well. But the information, we started the program before we went to go talk to the individuals, so they didn't understand what was happening. So do as I say, not as I do. And have that information ready. Before you launch the program, go do the grassroots efforts. Go explain what's happening. I can guarantee you, you'll have a lot of support. And who doesn't love a community cat sticker? So we turned everything that we could that was in English into Spanish. So this is, it says, I support community cats. We have them in English, but we also have them in Spanish. And I see those bad boys everywhere. I go to breakfast, go get pan dulce, and they're everywhere. And that's just a simple way to know that there is community members having support and having those conversations on their own. It was easy peasy. I told Maria, Maria told Pedro, and so on and so forth. And we saw that happening on the north side as well. You know, it was a matter of us making the effort to go to the community, take the time to explain, and really help them understand what was happening. One of my favorite things that I learned from Best Friends was being able to take things that are already happening in the communities and putting a twist on it. So that top corner with the Chihuahua, you'll notice that it's a bilingual. I know some people say don't do Spanglish. I'm 50-50, it kind of depends on what we're talking about, but it says we're having a block party, es hora de celebrar, English and Spanish. We're inviting everybody, right? I want you to be welcome whether you know Spanish or not, whether you can read it in English or in Spanish. But I'm putting information on there regardless of your background, you're gonna come, right? Who doesn't want to hang out with that Chihuahua? He's wearing a bow tie and a poncho, like what? And so simple things like that can just go such a long way. So make sure your information is bilingual, provide everything you can, including your stickers in Spanish, and engage with the future, engage with the children, make coloring pages, make all the things accessible. Talk to them about what's happening in your shelter and how they can help in their community, because ultimately that's our community. Did you have something from that one? Okay. This is an example of something we're going to launch at Nebraska Humane Society as well. So it's a play on words. We have comadres and compadres, which sometimes means godparent or sometimes means friend. So we're calling them compadres and comeowdres. But basically what we're asking is we're asking individuals, regardless of where you live, you can live in Mexico, Canada, wherever, if you can speak Spanish, just conversational Spanish, I want you on my volunteer team. I'm going to teach you, I'm going to provide you resources and scripts, and then you're going to be able to talk to the community members that I don't have time to talk with because I'm one bilingual person on my team of 160, and you're going to help me answer those questions. What is TNR? When can I get my pet altered? Do you have resources? These are questions that volunteers can help me answer. Why not involve them? So again, and I'm providing them the scripts and the information so they know exactly how to reach out to me, when to reach out to me, and then what information it is. So we haven't officially launched it, so sneak peek, but I do think that this is going to help us really facilitate getting those quick answers so that we can make sure that the community is continuously staying engaged. And it's a cute picture. Cultural awareness. We kind of touched on this already, and as you know, we're predominantly speaking about Mexico because that is where I can speak on that community because I am that community. But know that there's so many other communities out there, so many other individuals, so many families, so many stories. So I employed you to understand who is within your community. Who are you representing? The significance of family is everything where I'm from. If I don't call my mom twice a day, she's calling the FBI. Like I am missing. If I don't answer on the second ring, I'm dead. And because of that, I know that I do the same with my children. If I don't talk to them once a day and know that they're physically breathing, I get concerned. But that's how I feel that same way about my dogs. I need to see my children and then I need to see my dog. Are they alive? Did my husband kill them? What's happening? And that goes such a long way. And the passion that we have for our animals, I mean, we involve them in everything. My parents threw a quinceañera for my Chihuahua, my family Chihuahua. She lived that long. True story, I have pictures. And they threw me one too, but not my younger sister, so we all know who the favorites are. But we involve them in any way that we can, right? These are our pets, they're familia. So make sure that you're understanding that when it comes to your communities, right? And involve them, make them part of the conversation. Who is that? What's his name? How'd you get him? Does he need anything? How can I help you? And pet ownership has so many different unique experiences. So my family, we kind of are everywhere, but it's different in Guadalajara than Nuevo León. So like, even though I'm from a country and my neighbor might be from the same country, we grew up in different cities. So even that experience is different. So keep that in mind. So what's your first reaction when you see this picture? Be honest. You don't have to answer out loud, but...
Be honest.
Yeah. Maybe. So this picture I went to go volunteer in Mexico 1 year as a vet tech, and we were doing a spay-neuter clinic. This is one of the dogs that came to our clinic. This is his owner. So he put both his dogs on that bike, put his helmet on, and drove it took him 3 hours to get to our clinic. And this man was 87, I want to say. At our clinic, you got free spay neuter. The one deal we made with the owners is that you had to help us with recovery because we knew that we were going to have more animals than we did people. So this man helped us recover his own dog. They got the male neutered, the female spayed. And then he took them back with him for 3 other hours. So 6 hours collectively to get his dogs fixed. So oftentimes when we see this, we think, ooh, that's a chain. What's that man doing? Why is that dog in that vehicle? It's going to jump out. But what we don't know is that person attached to the other end of that leash. That man drove 3 hours one way, 3 hours back. I wouldn't do that ever. Like, don't sign me up for cardio. So, I mean, that is someone that I love him. I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he did something that most people, I wouldn't, I'll be honest. I'd rather pay the extra money to go get my pet fixed, but he did that at 87, so how many people could say that they would do that?
And that can also manifest too, as if you have a spay-neuter clinic and you're seeing cats show up in pillowcases. Yep. Mm-hmm. That is like finding a pet carrier can be really hard, and that was sort of like the go-to workaround in a lot of Latin American countries where I helped with spay-neuter stuff, or I volunteered with spay-neuter, is we would see people just pulling up with pillowcases full of cats because that's what they had, but they were still making that effort.
Mm-hmm. Effort just looks a little different for every community, so just keep that in mind. Oh, hello. It's all you, boo.
I'm going to say some of the quiet parts out loud now. So sometimes I see this a lot on the boards, and I won't ask anybody to raise their hand, but I'm sure a lot of you, just nod internally. If you've ever heard somebody talking about the problem with their community, particularly in the South, I live in Deep South Texas, and when they're talking about the issues they face, they'll be like, yeah, we don't have a lot of spay-neuter vets, and then they'll also say something like, and we have a large Latin American community. That's been kind of an okay phrase to use for a long time in sheltering, but we need to unpack that, and we need to look at what that means and where that comes from historically. I've also heard, I can't tell you how many times I've heard they don't value pets like we do, which could not be, I think, farther from the truth. Again, that caring just looks very different. And historically, I've been in sheltering since 1992. We were adopting out pterodactyls at that point. But, and there's been some things that I have seen, and some things that are just backed up by data. Sheltering traditionally has been the enclave of like the middle to upper class white community. And if you look a lot of sheltering staff, predominantly women, they're going to be middle to upper class, and it's going to be a lot of upper class to middle class white women. There's also been very little data on our communities. We might be looking at certain zip codes, but we're not looking at our community members as to who is in our community, what language they're speaking, and what resources they might be challenged. And as a result, that's all sort of gotten packed into this shorthand of, oh, we have a large Latin American community, and not what the reality of it is, which is we have systematically neglected this community for 30 years. We have gone above and beyond to provide spay and neuter information and resources and made huge gains by doing that to our English-speaking population, while assuming that our Latin population, our Latine populations, which are substantially large, would somehow just sort of find their way to us. And there are other things, restrictive policies that made access to shelter services impossible. Almost no language accessibility. And if it was accessible, it either put the onus on the client, meaning we're going to need your 10-year-old child to translate for you, or you're going to have to bring somebody to translate for you. Or even if the shelters were doing the best they could, a lot of times they were using these really bulky phone translation systems that required calling from a landline and handing the phone back and forth. And of course, what we're still seeing, which is marketing that just, it doesn't even exclude a large swath of our population. Again, keep in mind that 1 in 10 number, as high as 3 in 10, and those are all underreported numbers. It literally ignores them. It pretends they don't exist. You see very few Facebook posts from animal shelters in Spanish. You see very little of that. And just also a lack of dialogue and a lack of engagement with the Latine communities. We're reaching out to our English-speaking stations and saying, can we do a pet of the week? We're reaching out to parades and saying, can we have a booth at your event? But we're not doing that with our Latine communities. So there's a lot of policies and a lot of assumptions based on cultural misunderstanding. And I would like to challenge each and every one of you that the next time you hear somebody say that part of the issue is a large Latin American community, you ask that person, can you explain what you mean by that? Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what the issue is? Because, quick tip, it's not them, it's us. Because what it really is we're not providing resources in that language. We are not reaching out to that community, and then we're blaming the victim and saying, well, why didn't you come here and everything? And this is why, you know, blah, 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 our community is having an issue. And it's something that we really need to dig deep in ourselves. And it's also something that when we are out in the community, if we are not a member of the Latina community, that we have to keep in mind, is to walk into interactions without that, you know, those stereotypes in the back of your head, and to walk into them with the idea that everybody there has good intentions, and to walk into them with an attitude of curiosity, as opposed to, well, I know this because I've lived in this community. And something I say a lot is, if I ask you why you do or say, your shelter does or says a certain thing, and you respond with a horror story, that's not a policy, that's not a rule, that's a trauma response. And we need to do better. We need to be making these decisions based on data and based on engaging everybody who lives in our communities.
I'm going to piggyback off that real quick and go rogue on us. But
all right, go rogue.
One of the reasons we wanted to create this workbook was just what you were talking about. So when we go into these areas and we already know we have that trauma response because we know we're not going to be able to communicate, or we think we won't be able to communicate, this workbook, the idea is even when we're asking the questions, we're not saying, why didn't you vaccinate your pet? We're saying, how can I help you vaccinate your pet? Here are some resources. So we're removing that blame, that judgment, and we're putting the questions the way we hope that you would speak it. So we're kind of yoga, Jedi mind tricking you here. But the goal with this, with addressing these issues, is just that the issue of lack of communication is an excuse to not be, to be judgmental, right? English or Spanish, The idea of being an animal care officer is just that. You're providing care, you're protecting both the person and the animal. So when we come to these communities and we don't speak the language, we should equally treat them just that way. So this book, hopefully, will Jedi mind trick you into removing that barrier and getting you into that right mindset.
And can I go rogue for a second,
Of course,
too?
yeah.
So Mutual Rescue translated a bunch of handouts on pet care, pet behavior. They're all on our website. They're all translated by a native speaker. You can download them. You can add your own logo to them and use them immediately. The same things you would give adopters, any adopter or client that would walk into your shelter. You can have those for free. And we're also working with a certified Spanish teacher from Guadalajara. And he's going to be doing a series of short language learning videos for shelter workers. And so in the future, we're in pre-production on those that will be available for all shelters for free as well.
When we said passion project, we meant passion project, so.
Yeah, we're in for sin, dude.
Yeah, what is sleep? We'll put a QR code at the end for you.
Trust me, we're gonna, and not only that,
Yeah.
but there's like QR code. We
Yeah,
got
we're like
QR
code
codes
freaks.
for days for y'all.
Yeah, you get a QR code and you get a QR code.
You get the whole enchilada?
Literally. So when it comes to practical strategies for outreach, I don't want you to make it complex. I do want you to see and absorb what's already happening. So I always tell people that there's 3 events it's really hard to mess up. Posadas, Dia de los Muertos, and Loteria. You can mess it up. I'm not saying you can't, but it's just really, really, you gotta put some effort into it. So when it comes to engaging with your Latine community, I want you to go out and partner with someone who's already trusted in the community. Is that the YMCA? Is that the bingo hall? I love going to bingo halls because all the grandmas already know what time it is. So that's when we do loterias. We bring kittens, we bring puppies. Sometimes we don't even do that. We have them do our enrichment. They love to do like sniff blankets and all that kind of stuff. They're already there. They're already hanging out. They're already drinking their coffee. So have your community, meet your community is what I meant, at where they're already congregating. I love going also to like the flea markets. I'm from Texas too, so flea markets. We would go and at the time, they were still able to sell animals at the flea market, at the pulga. So I would stand next to them and I would have free or low-cost vaccines and microchips right next to those guys that were selling the puppies. Because I'd say, oh, did you just, hey, come here, let me vaccinate, let me microchip. Let's talk about when you need to come back to me. I'm not trying to judge you, but I am trying to educate you. I'm removing that judgment. So when we do go out to these communities and we are finding these trusted leaders, I want you to be part of that solution. I want you to build that partnership. Attending and sponsoring cultural events is a huge hit. This last year, Nebraska Humane Society, the DI committee, committed to going out into cultural events that were already happening. We're not reinventing the wheel. So we went to a Cinco de Mayo one, which I have feelings about that, but that's for another session. And then we also did the Juneteenth. We got some swag, some t-shirts, we put our logos on them and we handed out to individuals. And then they talked to their friends. Hey, I got this shirt from NHS, you like it? It's cool, right? Yeah. And it was in whatever theme that was. So the ones for Cinco de Mayo were in Spanish. The ones for Juneteenth had an impactful, motivational quote on them. And they were culturally appropriate as well. We talked to community members. Is this okay? Is this something that you would wear? And that was how we did that. And we also, again, we went to that low cost, that pulga. We had flea and tick prevention. We talked about why you should microchip your pets. We talked about how it's not a tracking device and the government will not find you. Because that is a thing that some people might believe, and that's okay, but we were there to explain the why. Why is it important? How can I help you reunite your pet if it were to get lost? And then we used social media for that reason as well. We shared stories. Even if they weren't translated, we still shared them, but we wanted to make sure, my favorite tip is, everyone has a Telemundo. I don't care where you live, you have a Telemundo. And they know English, surprise, surprise. So connect with them because they could do all the work for you. So say, hey, I have this event. We really want to engage with our community that we haven't before. Can you help us with this? You look good, I look good. What do you say? And that was a simple way for us to move forward. And like Telemundos are everywhere, so do it. You have something? No?
No, not really.
okay.
The only other thing I would say is if you're sending officers out into the field, follow Jackie's example. Have your officers follow Jackie's example of never coming with your hands empty.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning that if you are going into a neighborhood to look at a skinny dog, if you're going into a neighborhood about loose dogs or something like that, have a couple bags of food in your car, have a couple of leashes, so that initial interaction, you are just really basically showing them, look, I'm not here. I'm here to be a resource for you. And of course, have the information about your pet pantry and everything, but definitely make sure that your officers, when they're going out with something to offer as opposed to just to lecture or whatever, because again, we're still working on that seismic shift in animal welfare from, being like the enforcers to being resources. And so definitely take that into account with your Latin communities as well.
Absolutely. So changing perception. We've kind of already given you some tips and tricks, but when it comes specifically to animal control or even anyone in animal welfare that's already going out to your community, one of my favorite things and simplest things is I take business cards that are in English and in Spanish, right? So regardless of who I run into, and it says on the back, my name is blank, officer blank, and I am from blank shelter, in English and in Spanish on the back. And regardless of how far we got in our conversation, I'm giving them that card, and they're remembering that I put forth that effort to make that connection with you, and most of the time they will call you back. Sometimes they'll call you and ask you, I had one lady asking me all kinds of questions about her community cat and why it howls and this whole, we're friends now. I talk to her 3 times a week. I haven't lived in that town for years. But because I made that connection with that one individual, she told her friend, who told her friend, who told her friend, and so on. And so with that one engagement that I had, and we didn't get very far because she was from a different country that, they assumed, the assumption was that, oh, she speaks Spanish, so she must be from Mexico. So they sent me, and I went, and come to find out, she's actually Venezuelan, and we speak Spanish, but they're very different Spanishes, trust me. So I even had a hard time communicating with her because a lot of the things that I was saying did not translate in a way that she was going to really understand. So I had to go back, do some homework, and then provide her those resources in a way that she would understand. So because of that connection, because I put forth that effort, not once but twice, she then was able to tell the rest of her friends, and I was the go-to person. They adopted me as their Venezuelan grandchild. So it was something that is as simple as just trying a little harder and making that connection work. Humane officers going to schools and community events. I've heard so many great stories. I'm seeing the shift. But again, take those. My favorite thing that one of the animal control agencies I worked for did was they took Hot Wheels, like ACO Hot Wheels, and would pass them out to the kids on the streets and be like, hey, take this. It was a positive interaction. They weren't seen as animal control. They were seen as just a buddy. Friends would get to know where the hot spots, so they would go for tamales or they would go for, whatever the case might be, and they were able to make those connections not just as an animal control officer, but as a friend. So make sure that you're recruiting people that want to put forth that effort as well. And show your team's positive impact, storytelling, it's important. So when you do reunite an animal in that community, share it. Ask them to do an interview. Ask them how it felt. Maybe if they don't want to be in there, maybe can you take a picture of them holding it and crop out their face and talk about how Paquito went back home. Just little things like that really go a long way.
If I can give a good example of that, is anybody familiar, is it anybody from Española Humane here? Is anybody familiar with Viva Pancho? Definitely go Google Viva Pancho. Pancho was a dog who got badly injured protecting his Latin family. And it became a national news story, and it was reported on. They shared the story minute by minute. They showed how much this family loved this dog, how they drove all night trying to keep this dog alive. And this story was huge both in Mexico and in the United States, and it spawned the hashtag Viva Pancho. And it resulted in the whole town having a community celebration that was very mixed, where there was a mariachi band that came and played in the kennels, and there was food and everybody when Pancho finally recovered. And it was a really great way to engage both communities at once. But definitely look up Pancho from the Española. It's a perfect example of sharing those stories.
So takeaways, trust and culture understanding are the heart of engagement. If you don't have trust, you don't got pie. Accessibility, it seems like a lot of work to put these things into action, but they're already out there, and we're going to provide them with you. So you really have no excuse after this. Yeah.
I'll be the Vanna White here.
Perfect. And then when doing, I think one of the things that people tend to overplay is when they do try to do visuals and graphics, there's too many words, especially in Spanish, like a little bit goes a long way. So keep it simple, right? If I just showed that picture, you would understand that I'm talking about something warm and fuzzy, and I don't have any words on it. You'll notice, I hope you noticed that in my slides, I had a butterfly in every slide. And so for me, butterflies are something that represent like just all the good things, right? And so I wanted to share that with you, and the butterfly is always there, just you have to look for it. So remember that when you're out in your community, look for your butterfly, do the thing that's gonna help another person find that butterfly. And I know we're wrapping up soon, so I'm just a sneak peek of what we're doing. So for the book, I know we already kind of spoiled it for you, but one of the things that we really wanted to emphasize on is I learned this the hard way when I started learning English. I was in elementary school and they were like, oh, what does the dogs, we were like little, and they're like, what does the dog say? And I was like, oh, whoa, wow. And no one knew what I was talking about. Because here it's woof, right? Woof, woof. Or bark, bark, or meow, meow, right? But even that, the cow, while the cow does say moo, the frog doesn't say, I don't even know what the frog says in English. Ribbit, thank you. It says cuckoo in Spanish. So,
but what does the fox say?
Yeah, I don't know what the fox says. But little things like that, it goes a long way. So just knowing that when going to speak to someone as an animal control officer and you're like, I don't know what the name is for a dog. Well, wow, boom, done. You've started that conversation. So the information is out there and we're providing it for you as well. So again, no excuses. Dog breeds. We wrote a whole list of dog breeds. My uncle lives in Guadalajara, and he knew I loved pugs, but he didn't know what the pugs, what breed they were. He couldn't picture what I was talking about, and I was like, they're pugs. And I looked at my dad, I was like, a pug. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, boog? And he was like, oh. And, there was contact to it afterwards, but a Dalmatian is a Dalmata. There are just slight little changes. So the book will have cheat sheets for you, I promise. But even knowing your breeds is going to be helpful, and you're going to be able to engage with that community a little bit better. So, ta-da. So if you scan that QR code, you'll go to a PDF, or at least I hope you will. And you can download your own, but I do have a few copies for those individuals that want a hard copy, so I'll stand.
I'll go hand out hard copies.
These are the
okay,
yeah.
All right.
And we have a little bit of time for 2 minutes for questions. If anyone, you do have to talk in the box. Anyone have questions other than, oh no, she wants a passport.
I want one.
You want the book, okay.
Yay, awesome.
I'm going to hand.
If we run out of passports because there was a delay and blah, 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 again, you can download it or you can take a picture of our emails and we can also send you some. I have 25 more waiting for me in Omaha, so.
Yeah, can you pass those back?
So animal control officers, please take this workbook with you. I'm looking at you. If
I'm
you
going to
have
put these
questions,
over here. If you want one, take it, just pass it back and pass it around.
Yep. So at the
one left
back,
with
for those of you that will get a workbook or a QR code, the very back, so you're gonna have Mutual Rescue, that's Finn and all her amazing passionate work right there. You're also gonna have the Humane Society's phrase book, It last was updated in 2022, so it's got good info, but it's a little outdated for those of us who know. AVMA, for those of us who have vet clinics, they already have great resources. It's a lot of information, so there's no fun way to talk about parvo in English or in Spanish. This wouldn't necessarily be, this is like your serious talks. And then Finn did me an awesome favor, and this QR code is going to take you directly to different resources that she's tried herself, whether that's a podcast, learning sessions, just you name it, she's tried them all. Well,
I'm 50 years old, and I used to speak Spanish when I was younger, but I forgot it. And so I have been learning Spanish again for 6 years. So everything that is in these Spanish language learning resources for people that really want to learn, my tired old brain has been through it, and I completely recommend them.
And lastly, I invite you guys to join Solar. It's a group where it was created by Latina for Latinos, but we realized quickly that we need to involve all parties in this conversation. It's called Solar on Facebook, but S.O.L.A. And so with that, you'll be able to continue, ask us, what do you need? What resources do you need? And I can guarantee you there's people there that will help you provide. Yeah. Is this book available if I want to go to your website or something to get ordered? Oh, like one of these? This is just a passion project that we're doing because we're crazy. So, yeah. Well, we didn't think they'd be that hot, so we're gonna work on a way to make that happen for you. But yeah, Solar is the group back here. Mutual Rescue is Finn. So
yes.
Together we are hoping to spread some knowledge to some ACO friends of ours and hopefully some other friends in the shelter.
Okay.
So.
And all of the handouts too, you don't need the workbook to access.
Yep. Thank you guys. We
Thank
appreciate you.
Thank you.